Earlier this month, Germany sent medical personnel and equipment to Portugal. The goal was to assist a fellow EU member state with its COVID crisis. But now it seems the mission has also benefited a Chinese-owned luxury hospital in Lisbon. DW's Jan-Philipp Schultz reports.
German soldiers sent into battle against COVID-19 in Portugal's capital city, Lisbon. It's an act of solidarity between two EU countries, but as we discovered, they are also a small part of a much bigger story of Chinese investments that reach around the world. This is what those German soldiers were probably expecting. Portugal's public health system is struggling to cope. Ambulances line up outside completely overwhelmed hospitals. But this is where the soldiers are fighting the disease, a five-star private hospital.
This is the Hospital da Luz. It's where football legend Cristiano Ronaldo came for an operation on his foot some years ago. On its website, the hospital says it's proud to be continuing all of its normal services despite the pandemic. Those services cover a wide range from cancer treatment to cosmetic surgery. Not only that, in its latest annual report, the hospital says it will continue to focus on profitability despite the pandemic. The hospital isn't providing the intensive care unit for nothing. The Portuguese government is paying.
The operating company behind the hospital is in the hands of a Chinese conglomerate. We asked a health ministry representative who was paying for what.
There's an agreement with a private hospital, yes, to have the patients here.
So you have to pay the private hospital some money that you can use the facility?
Yes, because we are using their services.
The hospital did not want to speak with us, offering a statement instead.
Luz Sauda Group, considering the critical stage that Portugal is going through, does not intend to benefit financially from the situation, but above all to help the country.
Chinese conglomerates own many healthcare companies in Portugal, a trend that worries a number of observers. Rui Barros, an investigative journalist, found out that in the first 6 months of the pandemic, the Portuguese government paid to the Luz Saúde Group around 40 million euros for COVID-19 services.
It's interesting to see that these three biggest these three companies that got the most amount of money had obviously connections to China, and China had a key role on how the Portuguese government handled the pandemic.
Do you think this will increase Europe's and Portugal's dependency on China?
I think it's a debate that, as Europeans, we should be having.
They are just 26 military medics sent from one European country to another, but their work offers a glimpse of a new reality. That reality is of EU countries relying on a hospital owned by Chinese companies as part of their for-profit business.
Well, our report, they're looking at one example of Chinese investments in the EU and the questions that they raise. Let's talk about that trend now with Clifford Coonan from DW Business. Hi, Clifford. Tell us, first of all, more about the backdrop here, this EU-China trade agreement. What is that and what is it going to do?
Well, China is now the EU's biggest trading partner. It's just overtaken the United States. And the aim of the trade pact is to level the playing fields as far as Europe is concerned, because China did have some advantages in trade. And it will also give the EU and China greater access to each other's markets. So that's the background to this.
And how has the pandemic affected Chinese business and influence in the EU?
Well, the pandemic has left the Chinese economy as the only major economy that's actually growing in any significant way. So it's given China a lot of economic muscle, and it's also given it quite a lot of political muscle. With the trade pact is one example, where the EU overrode some of the US concerns about the trade pact, for example, because they wanted to ally themselves closer with the EU. Instead, the EU is sort of going it alone. And a lot of that is down to the fact that China has developed this economic muscle because of the pandemic. And the EU bought vast quantities of pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, personal protective equipment, and medical supplies from China as a direct result of the pandemic, which has really boosted imports. And that trend looks set to continue. So I think in broad terms, the pandemic has really accelerated Chinese business and given it the kind of influence that it would have taken. It was probably going to happen anyway, but it definitely would have taken considerably longer had it not been for the pandemic.
So beyond the pandemic, how are Chinese investments translating into political influence in Europe?
Well, one thing was I spent 15 years in China as a correspondent, and every year, annually, the German government would arrive with a huge trade delegation. And it was just really obvious to see the close links between trade and political influence. And I think that we've seen that, we see that we see that Daimler, for example, its biggest shareholder is a Chinese tycoon with very close government links, and also the Beijing Auto, a state-owned car company. So, and we also have Huawei, which is another example where, even though it's been controversial in the US, in the EU, a lot of companies have brushed aside sort of US concerns about security and are using Huawei because China's political influence is now so strong in Europe. So I think that Chinese investments directly translate in many ways into political influence. And that's something that's probably going to continue. We have to wait and see, of course, what happens with EU relations with the US. But for the moment, when all of these factors are brought together, the situation is that the EU is definitely looking to boost its relations with China, and China's influence is set to expand incredibly over the next few years.
DW Business reporter Clifford Coonan, thank you so much.